China's economic coercion is a form of statecraft that uses trade and investment as tools to pressure other countries to comply with its political demands. China has repeatedly resorted to this tactic against countries that have challenged its interests or values, such as Japan, Norway, South Korea, Australia, and Lithuania. In this section, we will examine how China's economic coercion has impacted its targets and the global order. China's economic coercion has caused significant economic damage to some of its targets. For example, China imposed a ban on Norwegian salmon in 2010 after Norway awarded the Nobel Peace Prize to a Chinese dissident. This resulted in a 60% drop in Norway's salmon exports to China and a loss of $1.2 billion over a decade. Similarly, China restricted imports of Australian coal, wine, barley, beef, and other products in 2020 after Australia called for an independent inquiry into the origins of COVID-19. This led to a 40% decline in Australia's exports to China and a loss of $3 billion in the first half of 2021. China also imposed sanctions on Japanese automobiles, rare earths, and tourism in 2010 and 2012 after Japan nationalized the disputed Senkaku/Diaoyu Islands. This caused a 14% drop in Japan's exports to China and a loss of $20 billion in 2012 alone. China's economic coercion has also undermined the global order based on rules and norms. By violating its commitments under the World Trade Organization, WTO, and other bilateral and multilateral agreements, China has eroded the credibility and effectiveness of these institutions. China has also created a climate of fear and uncertainty among its trading partners, who are reluctant to criticize or challenge China on issues such as human rights, democracy, or security. China has also exploited its economic leverage to influence the policies and decisions of other countries on matters that affect its interests or values. For example, China pressured South Korea to reverse its decision to deploy a U.S. missile defense system, THAAD, in 2016 by imposing unofficial sanctions on South Korean goods, services, and cultural products. This resulted in a 50% drop in South Korean exports to China and a loss of $15 billion in 2017. China also pressured Lithuania to withdraw from the 17+1 cooperation mechanism with Central and Eastern European countries in 2021 by suspending diplomatic ties and halting trade after Lithuania established diplomatic relations with Taiwan. This resulted in a 91% drop in Lithuania's exports to China and a loss of $200 million in 2021. In conclusion, China's economic coercion has had negative consequences for both its targets and the global order. It has inflicted substantial economic losses on some countries, while undermining the rules-based system that governs international trade and commerce. It has also created a sense of intimidation and distrust among its trading partners, who are wary of provoking China's wrath or losing access to its huge market. China's economic coercion poses a serious threat to global justice and democracy, as it seeks to impose its will and values on others through economic means. China's economic coercion is a form of statecraft that uses various economic measures to pressure, punish, or reward other countries for their political or strategic behavior. China has employed economic coercion against many countries that have challenged its interests or values, such as Japan, South Korea, Australia, Canada, and Lithuania. China's economic coercion often involves informal or extra-legal actions, such as popular boycotts, trade and tourism restrictions, administrative discrimination, and defensive trade measures. These actions are usually implemented by state-owned enterprises, local authorities, or patriotic consumers, making it difficult to attribute them to the central government or seek legal remedies. The responses and strategies of the affected countries and the international community have varied depending on the nature and intensity of China's economic coercion, as well as their own economic and political interests. Some countries have tried to resist or mitigate China's economic coercion by diversifying their markets, strengthening their domestic resilience, seeking legal remedies, or forming coalitions with like-minded partners. For example, Japan has diversified its supply chains and reduced its dependence on China for critical materials and technologies after China imposed rare earth export restrictions in 2010 over a territorial dispute in the East China Sea. South Korea has sought to balance its economic ties with China and its security alliance with the United States after China imposed unofficial sanctions on its tourism, entertainment, and consumer sectors in 2017 over the deployment of a U.S. missile defense system. Australia has launched several trade disputes against China at the World Trade Organization, WTO, over China's imposition of tariffs and bans on its agricultural and mineral exports in 2020 to 2021 over a range of political disagreements. Canada has rallied international support for the release of 2 Canadian citizens detained by China in 2018 in retaliation for Canada's arrest of a Huawei executive at the request of the United States. Lithuania has joined forces with other European Union (EU) members to counter China's economic coercion after China recalled its ambassador and suspended trade talks with Lithuania in 2021 over Lithuania's decision to allow Taiwan to open a representative office under its own name. The international community has also expressed concern about China's use of economic coercion and called for a coordinated response. The Group of Seven, G7, countries are expected to issue a statement of concern about China's use of economic leverage abroad and a broader proposal for how they will work together to counter economic coercion from any country at their summit in Hiroshima, Japan next week. The United States has also proposed a multilateral trade initiative with its allies and partners to address unfair trade practices and market distortions by China.